Yeah, green for green, sustainability. That will lead us straight into the topic we're going to talk about today, isn't it? Do you want to introduce the topic, Mark?
So today's topic for discussion is greenwashing, a sustainability question mark, and it's a subject which for both Lisa and I within our industries has been around for decades. And certainly about 20 years ago, it was a subject that was discussed by every brand. Every brand was talking about it, sort of, we need to get this into our CSR campaigns, corporate social responsibility campaigns, and making sure that our brands are seen to be looking after the environment. It's interesting to see how it's developed over time, and certainly in the more recent years, how people are starting to sort of question mark it and sort of, right, what does it mean? What is it about? Does it really have any purpose? So where do you want to start these? Because it's a big old subject here, and we've got some serious examples of where it's
And
happening.
we should always talk about the definitions. We should always do definitions first. So greenwashing is misleading consumers about environmental practices or the benefits. And to your point, and every business that you work for, we have a sustainability council within our business. We advise clients on how to talk about sustainability or be more sustainable to a certain extent. I know 3 or 4 years ago, it was an even bigger buzzword than it is now. And I think I hate to say this is a slightly controversial opinion, but I know that probably maybe 4 years ago, everyone was talking about sustainability. How can we help clients? What can we do? Talking about carbon offsetting of websites, all sorts of things. And all of a sudden now, all of that focus, it's still there, it's still in the background. We can still do it. We know how to help people talk about sustainability. But now the buzzword is AI, and that's the new thing in our industry. So I feel like it's kind of gone a little bit on a back burner, but definitely for clients and in the world that we live in, packaging design specifically, at the time everyone's like, oh, what's it going to mean for packaging design? And we're like, things still need to be packaged. It's
Yeah.
just a different way of packaging them. But maybe let's dive a little bit more into different examples perhaps of some greenwashing
Yeah.
that we might have seen, because there's a super obvious one, Mark. And when I was doing my bit of research for this, and it's something that happened so long ago, but you never thought about it. If someone went, have an organic product, and you'd put it, there'd be green on there, there'd be leaves on there, the word organic would be huge, and there'd be all these earthy colors. And
That's it.
every client at the time would want organic to look like that, because all of those earthy cues and even like you said, the green jumper or whatever it is suggests that it's a little bit better for the world around you. It's planet focused. So I
Yeah.
think even that, it's moved on now, but I still think those things exist.
Absolutely. In terms of examples, you're absolutely right. Packaging is a sort of prime spot to sort of pick out where it was prominent. And I think back to my time in Australia, and a lot of the packaging we were producing at the time, brown craft paper, even the textures, the matte as opposed to gloss, all to sort of give these subtle impressions on pack how this is a natural form. It's being basically placed into a brown paper bag, or that was the look and appearance of it. But knowing full well that the materials it's been made out of, it wasn't necessarily recyclable. It might have had a film on inside. I mean, sorry, I probably leaped ahead here, but another prime example is Starbucks, or I'm sure Costa went through the same issue as well about the recyclable cups. Of course, we were led to believe that Starbucks are going to save millions of dollars because they're going to start using recyclable cups. You can use your what was sort of a one-use cup, and then you put it in the bin or the recycle bin, and it gets recycled. But the problem being, whilst it was paper on the outside, it had a film on the inside, and this film wasn't recyclable, wasn't biodegradable. Again, there are plenty of examples of that as well, similar. But it's really interesting to see how companies have taken the leap a little bit too quickly, and that we haven't really thought about the impact of, well, is it really what you're saying? The green leaf on the pack, what are you trying to say?
And the cups is always a really good one, I think, because I think we were led to believe it's biodegradable or it's a special cup. And then there was also the education around actually the cup is, but the lid isn't. And so even once you'd finally got the biodegradable liners of the cup, the lid would still have to be separated. And I know there's also some really good stuff happening in the space, so I don't want to take away from, I know that Starbucks in America, I'm not sure about England, and no one drinks Starbucks in Australia, but they've made the top of the lid that used to be plastic is also biodegradable as well now. It's
Yes,
made out of
isn't it?
that paper form. So I think there are good things happening, but there's still a lot of awareness. Even I know we can talk to some of this. I think one of the examples I saw was a brand called Keurig that made recycling claims. Tetra Pak years ago, I remember doing a design for Tetra Pak, and the company, it was a pea milk based company, and everything about, and they wanted to shout about sustainability. Pea milk used less water, all of the things about the product were great, but it was stored in Tetra Paks. And whilst you might go out there going, this is more sustainable, it's better. The actual Tetra Pak had to be sent back to Tetra to recycle it. So then there's carbon offset of the it needs to travel. And so there's all these different things that I think even, and some of it I don't think is an intentional greenwashing. I think some clients, some companies are just naive enough to go, actually, it's traveled this far around the world, perhaps that's not super sustainable. We were just talking about exporting, weren't we? And actually think about the amount of carbon offsetting that we'd have to do to, maybe Trump, maybe that's his real mission, to reduce carbon offsetting by deterring everyone from exporting anything from their country into America at the moment.
Do you know, that's a really interesting point. We have the same issue here in the UK, where the government have set all these challenges for themselves of making themselves a carbon neutral country by this amount of time. So whilst we're stopping some forms of industrial production, be it steel or whatever it might be, and we're having to import from other countries, the carbon footprint of something, if you want to use that as a term, the carbon footprint of us importing that amount, we might as well have made it here because the amount of pollution exactly that we're producing. So it kind of doesn't really make sense. And there's lots of other issues like the electric cars by whatever it is, 2030, which will never happen. These sorts of things. So the term greenwashing, I think, is becoming a bit of a swear word with most people in most industries. And I think consumers are starting to see that sometimes there has to be some sense put into this, and you have to try and think, well, whilst we want our world and everything to be produced in the most organic, possible way, sometimes it can't always be the case, and it might take a bit longer, but it might take 100 years for it to happen. I mean, 100 years, 50 years. But trying to make these things happen in a number of years, or you get penalised, taxed massively, or you can't buy a petrol car, for example, which is a real bugbear of mine, and by 2030 or 2035. Oh, it's insane. So I'm not a fan of the whole green sustainability message when it's being applied incorrectly and not been truly thought about.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. I think it's really good when they set targets and incentives and all those kind of things. But I think that also leads to people pretending things that aren't actually real. Like some of the research I was doing before of some of the companies, Ryanair was fined for low emissions claims. Delta also had false carbon neutrality claims. And some of those things, and we all see them, we're bombarded with travel greener. This is a better way, a cleaner way to travel, a better way to travel, that we're starting to become really skeptical of these kind of things. Is it? And also, we might like to think that the studies have shown that people also in an economic breakdown, they don't have the money to spend so much more on what potentially is meant to be more better for the environment, that actually claims might suggest is not really it. There's also companies that cover things up. It's a kind of a bit left field, but I saw that Anglian water concealed some of the pollution. So it's almost also, it's the misleading parts, I think, that then consumers are going, actually, what's real and what's not. And then they're seeing that because they can't hit the targets that the government is setting, people are covering up some of the things that are really happening. H&M was a big one that came up when I tried to Google all the examples. H&M's conscious campaign about how good their cotton is and things, and then all the work ethics of the people that make that cotton and stuff that came back on them. And the amount of times they used the word conscious fashion in that whole campaign, and then kind of came undone by going, actually, they're not that conscious, because look at it's fast fashion. Like, people are encouraged to throw it away. It's not super well made. All of those kind of things that kind of, they came unstuck a little bit. And that makes us go as consumers, well, I don't know if as a brand, you've lost my trust. And my biggest thing is, as a brand, once you lose someone's trust, really hard to get it back.
But that's an interesting point, because there are survivors, companies and corporates who have been found guilty. I mean, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, their sort of plastic straws, paper straws, and that whole sort of scenario. VW with Dieselgate, where they were sort of making their cars basically show that they weren't giving off as much emissions as they actually were. Yet VW as a brand, up until today, we've got sort of announcements that have been made basically by Trump, but up until today, we're doing particularly well.
And it's an interesting one, because VW were the ones at the time. I remember doing a case study on their website, because their website gave you the option to pick the sustainable option, where you didn't have the sexy high-end visuals or the sexy high-end visual option. So it gave consumers the choice, and you picked which version of the experience you wanted. One was obviously more intense on the environment or not. So it's interesting that they also, and again, it's also about going, we were wrong. We shouldn't have done that. Carbon
And
emissions
yeah,
that we've talked about.
I think a few people's heads rolled after it, but and I don't remember the names exactly. I mean, in the motor industry in general, I mean, I know we're sort of branding and packaging, but talking about the motor industry and how they are suffering massively because of the electric car era, if you like, is now upon us. And of course, they're trying to stop the production of petrol cars. So all these companies are having to sort of reform themselves in some way, and some are losing out and some are gaining. But us as consumers, we are losing out massively because we're having to find it's going to cost us more to potentially buy vehicles which aren't recyclable. For example, in electric vehicles, you purchase a car, it drops down in value massively. You kind of wonder what's the reason, and we're going to be renting cars from this point forward, like an iPhone.
But do you think, Mark, over time, a bit like, because I always think about the food chains and stuff and how originally to have alternative milk used to cost you a lot more money, and it still does some places in Australia, but over time, they've had to reduce the cost of those things because it became more mainstream. So if they are no longer producing petrol cars, surely the cost or something of an electric car must become offset. There must be
And
something
it is
that makes it
already.
more accessible.
You're right, but then we've got this sort of adjustment period where we're having to sort of figure out how do we make this work then? Because at the moment, people can't charge their cars. It's
No,
great that we've got
no.
these electric cars available to us, but where are we going to charge them? Where can we go to? And when we're going to charge points that are broken down or aren't working, and then you've got queues of Teslas trying to use, or not just Teslas, but
and and businesses as well. I mean, our one of the things that came up, we had a big sustainability roundtable the other day, so asking people across the business how we could be more sustainable as a company, and we're a big global business, right? But just specifically in Australia and Sydney, and some of the ideas were really good. They were really small, simple ideas that were really good. But one of the ones was, I need charging points for my car. I've got an electric car. And you go, well, that's massive for a company to go,
yeah.
okay, how do we make that one? I mean, obviously we can't make that one a reality, but definitely it will be pushed onto big businesses. They will move offices because there's rechargeable car spots there, and that's what people want, and that's what motivates people. So it's an interesting. Whereas the simplest one was, we need to remove the amount of black ink on the front cover of a photography brief. What a great win! Like, because normally a big SGK piece goes across the front and it's all
Oh, of
black.
course, yes,
So as simple as like literally just put the title on the page. It's an
yes,
internal document. No one cares. We print it so we've got reference of it in the photo studio for the shoot.
yeah.
Just don't print it in black. Really small,
No,
simple
that's it.
win.
That's an interesting one. The paperless office was something that was discussed. I remember it being at university, and that was the next thing. By the year at the time, yeah, by 2010, we'll have a
Yeah.
paperless office where everything is digital. Of course, it never is. And even at home, I find myself printing things out so I can see it.
Yeah.
My site, Gary, but nonetheless, you end up. Everyone's using printers still. We still use mail. Marketing campaigns still involve sort of print material. So
Well, that's an interesting debate when you say about marketing campaigns, because then we became so aware of digital sustainability as well. And just
yeah,
because you move something online or you move it away from paper doesn't make it better for the environment. So I think that's, again, it's an interesting decision, right? Because someone goes, oh, but it's online, like it's better. Actually, is it? And I can't pretend to know as much of the detail. I've worked with people who know the detail of how much websites offset and how you
yeah,
should track it and those kind of things. That blows my mind. But we're using so much technology, there's actually a cost to that too.
yeah. Do you think consumers are becoming numb to it now? And we spoke about upfront about let's say in a packaging format using sort of semiotics or materials and textures. Do you think consumers now don't necessarily think about the sustainability aspect because they just assume that corporates and corporations are doing it already?
I think there is an assumption with some things that the changes have been made. I think definitely with recyclable formats, with the expectation that no bars will have plastic straws, they'll just have paper ones if people want them. I know a lot of cafes here removed like cutlery and straws, and if you want it, you have to ask for it. And I do think, because you see one or two, I mean, there's a place I buy my dinner from tonight, Fishbowl, and all of their packaging, they've been one of the first to talk about it, is recyclable. It's like a paper, cardboard stuff. But then I kind of assume surely everyone else is doing this now. And so I think there's an assumption that once one person changes, they make the changes. But then also, by the same token, a big company, one of my designers actually saw on his Instagram tonight, he has a packaging side to his Instagram where he just goes around and like finds cool packaging and then kind of audits it, I guess. He just
Yeah.
loves it. It's his passion. But he'd taken his little daughter to IKEA and they'd done an IKEA bunny rabbit for Easter. So a chocolate bunny rabbit that you make and build yourself. Great idea, super cool idea, but there was so much plastic around it that you go, so, oh, like it's IKEA, like they're cool, they're innovative, I want to buy it. Like kids love to make things, you can make your own Easter bunny, but the amount of plastic is just like he notices it because he's super aware of sustainability and he works in our business. But to the average consumer, it's something cool. They don't care that it's in plastic.
Are we not led to believe? Are we not led to believe? I know here in the UK, as consumers, even let's say here in I'm in Southwest England, Devon, and we have recyclable collections, every household collections, and they'll come around and they'll pick up your paper is and your plastics is different. And what we can't do, we're told we can't recycle black plastic, but clear plastic, white plastic, and to a certain extent, the sort of little foam boards that sort of the meat comes on sometimes, some of which are paper now, but nonetheless, you almost sort of you're blindly putting this into a recycle bucket, and you think, well, I don't know where it's actually going. Is it going to landfill? We're led to
Yeah.
believe it's going to be recycled. We don't know. We just have to sort of assume that the local council, we pay a fortune for our council tax. We're assuming that it's going to get taken and looked after. I don't actually know. I secretly
Yeah.
think it's collected, just shoved into landfills.
There was a scandal out here that was shown that whatever bins it is was getting all put into one bin and
Yeah.
then just
Yeah, you separate
chucked
it here.
away
You
really.
go to huge
You
lengths to
do.
separate it, and then suddenly someone at the other end, out of sight, is shoving it into a massive bag and
Yeah.
then digging it into a big hole in
Yeah.
the ground.
And even now, like there are things that like I like to think I'm pretty savvy, but there'll be times where I'll go to put a cardboard box in the recycling section, which is in three parts now at work. And normally it's Martin, who's someone who worked for us, goes, no, that's got a liner on the inside of it. You can't put that in that box. And little things like that, the outside part of it is, but it can go in. There's like we have one that's like paper and card recycling, mixed recycling, and then non-recycling. And that mixed recycling and recycling is such a sketchy area for me
Yes,
because
it
I
is.
think I have a I'm like it's a box. It can go in the card and paper recycling, and someone will go no because the liner in it suggests. And maybe they're used to I don't those little recycle logos that are on things. They become smaller because there's other messages that have got in the way. So I think, do people even look for it anymore? And I know some people have just always got into the habit. When my mum was over here, she was a ninja for anything I put in the rubbish bin. It'd be out, she'd be separating it, washing it out, putting it in the right box.
Yeah.
She'd be devastated to hear about the idea that it was all just shoved in the same bin anyway.
No, no.
But to your point, I think there are consumers that have expectations that some things are done right, but we're becoming increasingly skeptical about what that looks like, I think.
And at this point in time, and certainly, I don't mean to keep going on about it, in sort of the trade wars that are likely to be happening, where cost is going to be an absolute premium for most companies and organizations, the sustainability message, which we all know is there, and I think as consumers we are educating ourselves, and
We
we've come a long way in the last few years, and there's some way to go still, but and the cost of living crisis for most consumers, it's going to be cost going to be the key driver. So if you've got two options in front of you, and the option B is the one which is the most expensive because it's recyclable and organic and everything else, and option A is similar product, tastes the same or has the same purpose, but it's slightly cheaper, but is actually coming in a black plastic bottle or something or whatever is
Yeah,
necessary. I think most people would think, given the choice and given the fact that they're financially strapped a little bit, they'd go for the option A, the cheaper one. And I think that's going to only become harder over the next few years. So these
I
companies are going to have
agree.
to try even harder to get that message through.
I agree. And packaging will be one of the forefront things, I think. It always blows me away. I buy stuff from a company here that's like keto and low carb based foods, and it's the only place online I can buy things from. And it never fails to blow me away when the parcel turns up and it's delivered in Australia. It's not had to go far, but they still have those polystyrene bits in it to hold
Yes,
whatever's in the box. And there's a bit of, and you've seen alternatives to that are to put cardboard in it to keep it in place, but cardboard's heavier and obviously costs more money, so they don't use that. And then every time I open a box, there's a fight in my head to go, I shouldn't buy this. This is
yeah,
going straight into landfill. I know from working on Russell Hobbs in the UK and how we worked so hard with them to save them box space. But when they removed the ability. You used to have your microwaves used to be in like the polystyrene edges to keep it safe. And we worked so hard with them to find alternatives to go, the future isn't to use this polystyrene. So I know how damaging it is for the environment. So it, like, what is it, like 6 years later now, to still be opening boxes and it be filled with those little polystyrene noodles. that
Yeah.
feel weird in your hands, and the cats might like to play with them, but they're so bad for the environment. It's like a fight even in my head to go, I shouldn't order this, but it's the only place. And you would assume they sell really sustainable products. They're the ones that sell the cool stuff, but yet they're still shipping their stuff in an old school way.
I think secretly or subconsciously, I would be thinking, well, if this company in this day and age in 2025, they're going to be putting these polystyrene pieces are going to be organic. They're going to, biodegrade over a period of time, so it's not going to do any harm. You would like to think that, and I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't know whether that is the case. Whether these things are still going to be around in thousands of years, still sort of floating around for the cats of the future playing with. Who knows?
It's crazy, isn't it? And I think there is so much great innovation. I think one exciting thing about the space is there actually are really good solutions to this. And I think even our white table at work, and we've found ways, a really simple way that we came up with in the studio, was one of our designers' ideas is, we send proofs out when we have proofs that we have to check for color when we send them to a client. And you used to roll them into a cardboard tube, put the proof in a cardboard tube, put a plastic end on it, and send it out to the client. Now, those plastic ends were not recyclable. And so what we did was developed, and it also helps in space, a square version of that tube. So it's a square. And then what we do is we fold the ends over so it becomes just a little square box that stacks better up and up. And we just stamp it to tell people it's more sustainable. And so I feel as though there's so many really simple solutions if we just took the time to think about them. Or if you look around, someone's probably solved the problem already. And then obviously the biggest thing I always think is when we do these things, we're crap as an agency at telling people how good this is, that no other agency does this, that we save like thousands of these little round plastic things per year just by changing the format of that. And it was really hard to get it over the line, but once it was over the line, it saved money, saved time, and it saved planetary stuff.
I'm intrigued why they haven't actually been sort of communicating that as an organisation. It's the little things, but the little things all added up are a big thing. It's one of those things that happen deep in the belly of the company, but ultimately is actually is for the greater good. I know earlier on we were talking about investments, and at the moment it's something I'm really getting my head around, sort of outside of work, is where to invest money and what's the sort of where you're going to get the best return of investment. And what is really interesting is the green organisations and the green companies around the world. You'll know what I mean. For banks, there are sustainable banks that only use sort of invest
pensions,
companies, pension pots. But they are notoriously bad in performance, and they do not perform anywhere near as well. So you, as a person who holds a pension, for example, you've got this dilemma now. Do you start, I want the world to be a better place and I want to be investing in the right companies. But you kind of think, but I make more money if I'm investing in those companies which perhaps aren't necessarily shouting about their green credentials, or it's not necessarily something that there is a priority to them.
Yeah.
And it's a real challenge. Almost you as a customer or consumer, I don't know what way to go here, because I want to save money in some respects when you're purchasing something or investing. You want to make the best of your returns. So you've got to make that commitment, I think. And there's going to be losses somewhere along the way. And I think we as consumers need to understand that we've got to make a selection
that was one. Yeah, it was one. Actually, that was one of the things I wrote down when I just wrote very roughly some notes earlier, was about investment. Not only the brands that we talked about that are making these kind of false claims and stuff, that's going to affect their reputation in terms of actual investment in them. But you make a really good point, Mark, in terms of pensions, super funds over here, or banks. Are you going to invest in a more sustainable bank? And can you trust that where they then invest your money in, because the promise is, right, we're going to take your money and we're going to invest it in good things for the planet. What does that look like? Because I don't know that anyone has the time or energy to question what that looks like. They go, I'm sure they're rebuilding rainforests in Africa or something, and I'll put my money in there. But just because they say that, like, what proof points? Like, I don't know what tests there are. And I think the future will also be more regulation around when you claim something. What does that mean, or what does that look like?
That's what we want to happen. I think we all do. But deep down, we understand that for big companies and this sort of period that we're going to head into, sort of a period of austerity potentially, we have to really accept the fact that at the moment cost is more important than anything else right now. So people will look for the cheaper solutions or the solutions which will sort of give us a better return. And in some ways, it might be a bank that perhaps does invest in countries which aren't necessarily the most green. Whichever examples they might be, I'm not going to name them. Yeah, it's a real challenge. I think in summary of our sort of subject to greenwashing, like with all these subjects we've been talking about recently, is you have to make those choices. It's down to you as an individual as to what you think is right. What are your morals? What do you want for your children, for example? I know this is I sound like Greta Thunberg. I don't mean to, but it's kind of what do you want to happen? But by that same token, I also want to make sure that my children are okay in the future too, and they're going to have, let's say, I want to be able to hand money to them when I die, and so I want to make sure my investments are in place, that I'm
So
not
they
losing money because I've been investing in electric cars that weren't working, and perhaps I should have invested in sort of I don't know, some big petrol.
You want to be able to buy your little ones a diesel car, maybe, Mark. Remember when that was a thing?
Yes, exactly. In 2040, I want a brand new one. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, do you agree, Liz? Is it just down to the
I
individuals now? What would how would you see?
do, and I did put at the end of our little podcast set list a little summary, and I think there's two sides of it, right? And I think the side for consumers is research your brands, and if it's something you truly strongly believe in, there's definitely some things that I'm more against, the plastic debate and things that I watch out for. And I'll be totally honest, there are some things sustainability wise that I'm probably super oblivious to, whether the website I'm looking at has got super amazing graphics and that's affecting the planet. I probably should care more than I do, but in terms of making sure I take my keep cup next door or whatever, that's the stuff that's, to your point, small things make a big difference. So I think research, if it's a brand you're wanting to buy, or just become part of your everyday life, just research them and what they might claim, and always do question those. I don't want to make us all super cynical, but when something tells you it's made in nature, just question, what does that actually mean, and whether that's a good thing or not. Because I think we've worked in packaging design long enough to know, like, just because something looks natural doesn't necessarily mean it's natural in the purest form. Of, some of those protein bars have got so many additives in them. There's nothing about them that's natural. So I think just question the claims, look for recognized certifications, and look for really sustainable businesses. We had Thomas Colster on here a couple of years ago now, and he was always a good one to go, look, some of the early adopters are the ones you should believe, but even Patagonia want to sell me t-shirts.
Yeah.
Some of what they do to do that is a bit different. So I do think there are people that, they are a company that does seem to want to invest in good as well as sell t-shirts. But actually just really look for the ones that support sustainability and are open and honest enough to go, we don't always get it right. And then I did just put for brands, because I think it's important, if you're a brand and you happen to be listening to our podcast, to think about how transparent you are with communications. One of my biggest things is you don't have to be doing it all right, but be honest about the things that you are and the things that you're not. If it's Tetra and you have to recycle it by sending it to Sweden, tell people that you can recycle me, but you have to send me to Sweden or wherever it is you're originating from. Or you can recycle me, or maybe it's a really great opportunity to go, put me in the green bin,
Yeah.
put me in this bin, this is the bin you can put me in, and help just make it really simple for people, because people don't have time.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see more of those certifications around companies that claim to be. There's a load of stuff we're doing to research wise at the moment. There was a big wave of companies going B Corp certified. And now everyone's doing it. It becomes like, well, it's kind of either it's expected or it's not such a big song and dance anymore. So I think there'll be more certifications. It's like us with our design industry awards, isn't it? There's so many awards, we don't really know what any of them mean anymore.
Yeah, and some of them are made by agencies that create their own awards and then award themselves those awards. So it happens, and I'm sure that
We do
companies
that.
yeah, in the world of sustainability do exactly the same. So yeah, it is, from my point of view, it is just down to research. You as a consumer have to do your own research. Don't believe what you're looking at is and what the message you're being given. Even the governmental propaganda, whatever it might be, on the ozone layers depleting, and yet suddenly the ozone layer is not a big issue now. It's climate crisis. There are so many. You have to do your own research and then make up your own, form your own opinion of it.
And if you're a designer and you're listening to it and something really bugs you, find a solution. Like, think about a different, better way to do it.
Yeah, and brand owners need to do the same. I think it's a case if they're producing a product, let's work with those people around you to understand what is the most sustainable way of creating and forming this pack, be it your sort of cardboard tubes being changed into rectangular tubes with sort of paper caps on. Brilliant. Alice, I love putting the world to rights with you, because I agree. It's something which is always on the tip of our tongues, and it has been certainly within design for many, many years. And I think it's always going to be something that because we want to go out there, we want to champion, the green way of doing things. But by that same token, we don't want to sort of pull masks over people's sort of heads. and sort of,
No, I think it's good. It makes us question, even as designers, what we're putting forward now. So no, I
yeah,
think it's a good point.
yeah.
Really good there, Mark.
Super. All right, Lise. Until
See you
next time,
next
thanks ever
time.
so much.